Welcome to week 16 of Weekly Reads. We are starting April 21st, and I'm going to go through all the books that I'm in the middle of. I tend to start a lot of books, and we will see where it goes. I think I'm going to finish 3 books today, so it's going to be a very heavy, not necessarily reading day. I'm just really close to finishing 3 books. So very excited about that, but I'm going to share where I was at the beginning of the day to get us started. The first one is the Strawberry Patch Pancake House. It is by Laurie Gilmore and is the 4th book in the Dream Harbor series. In this book, we follow Archer. He is a world-renowned chef, finds out he has a 5-year-old daughter. The mom has passed away. And so to keep her life similar, at least for now, he goes to Dream Harbor, which is a small town, and takes over the diner. As he takes over the diner, the town isn't super happy with all the changes he's making and just wants her old pancake recipe back, but he can't figure out what it is. While he's doing the diner, he needs someone to take care of his daughter Olive, and so Iris, who has no interest of being a mom, steps in. She just needs something to kind of hold her down because she's jumping from job to job, man to man, because again, she doesn't necessarily want to be a mom or have a long-term relationship, and that has a lot to do with her past, which we unravel throughout the book. I am 70% of the way through this book. I have read a little bit today. I'm going to insert a clip. However, we'll say my kids were outside playing, so I'm not sure the quality of this clip, so very sorry. The second book that I'm in the middle of is my audiobook, and is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I was 26% of the way through starting today. I did do a big winter, summer, spring wardrobe switch, so I got quite a bit of the way through, and so now I think I'm about 70% of the way through. I chose to read this book because it was on the Rory Gilmore book list, and it fit the prompt for the month, and I did read this middle or beginning of high school, but I didn't remember it, so I put that I hadn't read it. But it is very similar than I remember, where there's a lady who commits adultery. She has to wear a red A on her shirt. She ends up having a daughter, and the daughter's asking questions, and you're trying to figure out who the father is throughout it, and the child is a very interesting character in this book. So the third book I was in the middle of this morning was The Liar's Knot by M.A. Carrick. I have been reading this book for so very long. This morning I was 80% of the way through, but I finished it. I am so excited. I will do a review on it later. I want to flesh out my thoughts on it because I just finished it, but I'm so excited because it took me so long to read, and it's been on these weekly reads for so long. I fleshed out my thoughts about The Liar's Knot by M.A. Carrick, so let's talk about it. It is the second book in a fantasy trilogy, and so the first book in a fantasy trilogy, I always expect to be a lot of world building, a lot of character development, and that's what this book was. We were getting a lot of the world. The magic system is intense and complicated. The characters, there's so many of them, and then they have different like code names, we'll say. I feel like we definitely flushed them out a lot more in book 2. The character development I really enjoyed, but we continued to do the world building, which for me just dragged it down. I'd rather have character development and action over the world building. I just personally would rather have a more simplistic fantasy world, and that's not everyone's cup of tea, and that's what I love about books. I am reading the 3rd book currently because I do like this series. It's just not one that's going to be a top fantasy series for me, and I also think it's partially just the time of my life that I'm reading these, where we have so much going on that my head is already spinning with all the things. I don't necessarily want to deep dive into a fantasy book, if that makes sense. I think it is a wonderful fantasy book, just not the fantasy book for me, and I end up giving that book 3.25 stars. The 4th book I'm in the middle of is Jesus, the One, the Only. This is the book I read about 10-15 minutes with my Bible study each morning, and I am 56% of the way through that. This book goes through Jesus' life and does have applications along the way, which I enjoy. The 5th book is the gratitude journal that I try to do once a day. Definitely miss days, so it's going into 2026 because there are 365 prompts, and I just want to focus on one like prompt a day to just focus on it and not try and get it done. I think I'm about 20% of the way done, but doesn't have page numbers or like dates or anything, so I'm not sure. The very last book that I am reading is the Bible. I have a reading plan that I am following, and so it will be done by the end of the year. We are on track, so that means we're about 29% of the way through. I don't have work today, so we've had a little more time to read, kind of. My kids are home, and I'm trying to get a lot of things accomplished because I don't know if you could see the mess around you, but it's messy. So I finished the Scarlet Letter. As I said, I read this in middle and high school, and so it was really interesting reading it again and just getting a different perspective as a mom, because this book is really the after effect of her adultery and her having to wear the letter A. The priests come and want to take her child away at one point, and I just felt so sad for her. I can't imagine someone taking away my children because of the choices she made and how the community is responding to them. All she has is a little girl, and so for them to come and want to take her away was just heartbreaking for me. And then just to see how the community, especially who we assume is the dad, treats her, I felt a lot more emotions in this book than I thought I would. And I ended up giving that book 3.75 stars. I finished the Strawberry Patch Pancake House. I talked a little bit about it before, but this is the 4th book in the Dream Harbor series. Archer has come to Dream Harbor because he finds out he has a daughter and is going to take care of her, but he needs help. Iris comes to be the nanny, and it is a romance book, and so obviously things go from there. I liked this book. I felt like it was a fever dream, like a lot was happening, but nothing was happening at the same time, because Archer is trying to figure out his pancake recipe and what he's going to do with all of his daughter. Iris is trying to figure out, does she want the responsibility of a daughter and what she wants to do. And so there's a lot going on, both like internally with Iris and externally with Archer, but at the same time, it felt like nothing happened. I will say the series as a whole has been very hit or miss for me. This book falls right in the middle. Definitely not my favorite of this series, but not my least favorite either. But yeah, I ended up giving it 4 stars. I'm jumping in to give a review of a book that I haven't mentioned thus far in my weekly reads. I believe I started it Monday and then it finished. I never mentioned that I started it. So we're going to talk about Come Rain or Come Shine by Jan Karon. It is the 13th book in the Mitford Years series. Most books in the series I've really enjoyed. There was one book I did not. This book is a wedding book. It is Father Tim's son Dooley is marrying Lace. And Dooley and Lace, we've both known, they end up spending a lot of their lives in Mitford. They both came from really hard past. And Lace's past for sure is coming back in this book, and they're dealing with some different issues. Dooley has graduated from high school and college and is now a vet and is taking over a vet practice. And so while they're gonna get married, rain or shine, which is where the title comes from, we are also seeing all their struggles that they're dealing with behind the scenes. We see Dooley as he's trying to get this vet practice figured out and balance it with Lace. Lace herself is having some medical things, and then there is a third person that comes into their lives and try to integrate them as well. And then obviously just the wedding shenanigans, and the town is so excited because, as I said, they're both Mitford kids. I really enjoyed this book and gave it 4.5 stars.
I am 70% into Sweet Obsession by Katie Roberts. It is a Dark Olympus novel, and it is Poseidon Icarus' story. I dyed my daughter's hair, so ignore my hands, but there's a lot of plot in this. Poseidon actually captured Icarus, so that's definitely an interesting dynamic, especially because in like the bedroom they are opposite of that, like who's in charge. I like their interactions with each other. The spicy parts are interesting, and then the plot is really plotting. Anyways, I'm gonna get to reading. I think I have about an hour and a half left. I'm liking it, not loving it.
So I ended up finishing Sweet Obsession by Katie Robert. As I said, it is a very plot heavy book and really moves the plot along, which I enjoyed because we've seen Icarus on the outside the last couple books, and then Poseidon has just always been in the background in all of the books. And so putting them together in this book I thought was gonna be really fun. Poseidon had captured Icarus because of Icarus's family. However, Poseidon's people take it a little too far, and Poseidon ends up being protective of Icarus, and then they form a relationship and a romance. And as I said in the last clip, it is the opposite. Icarus is in charge in the bedroom area versus Poseidon, and they talk about it that is kind of weird and interesting, and their like thoughts about it throughout the book. But for me, I didn't enjoy it. I was focused on that element, how it's so opposite, versus focusing on the element of like the relationship and what was actually happening. I don't know if that makes sense, but I liked Poseidon and Icarus separately. I did end up giving this book 3.5 stars.
I am 22% into Elatsoe by Darcie Little Badger. This is a young adult magical realism book, and I am not a huge fan of magical realism. Magical realism is a genre that has to be done a certain way for me to enjoy it, and I'm not sure if I'm enjoying it. So I like the magic part of this. She has a ghost dog and he goes crazy when bad things happen, and so he went crazy one night. She like rode her bike to a movie theater to tell her parents about it. Her cousin ends up passing away, but comes to her before he passes as like a ghost like person and tells her that he was murdered, that she needs to go keep the family safe, and gives her a name. So I like that part of it, but I don't like when she like rode her bike to the movie theater and her parents are worried that she was gonna get hit by a car. I was like, I don't know. I just feel like that just takes me out of the story when it's so like a modern time. I like magical realism if it's in the past. I don't know how I feel about it. It is one of the 25 books I want to read in 2025 because I won it in a Goodreads giveaway. So I'm enjoying it. There's parts that just take me out of the story. If it's like a historical fiction magical realism, then I'd rather just have the historical fiction without the magic. And in this book, I'd rather not be set in like current time or like so obvious in current time. I don't know. Magical realism and I just have a rough past. So we'll see how the rest of the book goes. Like I said, I'm trying 2% of the way through. I'm enjoying it. It's going pretty fast. We just found out the man that her cousin said murdered him is like this big family man and like is wealthy and has lots of charity events and things like that. And is even giving a trip away to Hawaii, which I get. I don't know. I just magical realism and I.
We have come to the end of another weekly read, week 16. So let's go over the 10 books that I have started. We're going to start at the bottom. I will explain why we have so many started, but yes, know that the end of the month is coming, which makes me look at my goals. And then just some like library loan situations happened because last week during the week, I don't think I was home for more than 30 minutes from the time of like 7:30, 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. and that's just not the life I normally live. So we've had a lot going on. The 2 books that have been on my currently reading the longest is The Gratitude 365. I try and do this once a day. It definitely didn't happen as much this last. I talked about it at the introduction, but it doesn't have like dates or page numbers. So I want to go through eventually and put page numbers down so I have like a general idea of how far along I'm in the book. The other one that's been on my currently reading for just as long is the Bible. I am behind in that one as well, but I will be catching up. It gives me like dates and I will just listen to that. I'm hoping maybe today or tomorrow and get caught up. I think I'm like 2 or 3 days behind. So not too bad, but definitely would like to get caught up on that. The Bible is going to take me the whole year, so you can do the math on how far along I am. The next one that's been on my currently reading list for the longest is Jesus, the One, the Only by Beth Moore. So typically I will read some of this and listen to the Bible as well. And since I missed the Bible, I definitely missed some of this. So we did go from like 56, I think, to 65%, but definitely should have been more, even though I only read this for like 10 or 15 minutes every day. The next book that's on my currently reading is Straight On Till Morning by Liz Braswell. This is part of the Twisted Tale series and I am 21% of the way through, but due to library loans, I had to put that one on hold, renew my loan, and then it will be coming back. But I am not currently listening to that one. It is the Peter Pan retelling where Wendy doesn't go to Neverland with Peter Pan, but Captain Hook. That is definitely a big twist. So I was enjoying it, but library loans dictated that I needed to not finish that one. The next one I started was True Cowboy of Sunset Ridge by Maisey Yates. This is 14 in the Gold Valley series, so one of the last ones. I started reading this and I am now on page 180. Which is about 60% of the way through this book. I've been reading this in any order, so I'm not close to finishing this series, but this has been my physical read for the morning when I have a moment to read it. So I started this one, and then it brings us to When I Fall by J. Daniels, and I started reading that one, which this is a cowboy romance, and that one is a contemporary romance, but the way that they meet, the way the characters interact are very, very similar, and so I was getting confused. I got 17% into When I Fall, but then I decided to just stop that one and read this one instead because this is a physical copy. And When I Fall, I rented from Kindle Unlimited. So I was like, I can finish this one and then go back to that one. But I am now 60% of the way through this one. Is about a bull rider. Colt is not a father, but a baby gets dropped on his doorstep and a newcomer to town, Mallory, is a midwife and is there to kind of help him. So there's that. This other one doesn't necessarily have to do with the baby, but it was just their interactions, like Colt and Mallory, and then the When I Fall characters, the way that they're meeting and like why they're in town. And it was just too close, and I try not to read books that are really closely related at the same time. I paused the When I Fall. That is part of the Alabama Summer. I think it's the 3rd book, so it is a series I want to finish. This is a series I want to finish, but I prioritize the physical reads. So those are my next 2 currently readings, even though When I Fall, I'm not going to read until I finish this book. And that is 5 of my 10. So the other 5 are Drums of Autumn, which is the 4th book in the Outlander series. I am listening to this. This is 43 hours long. And so I'm about 20% of the way through, but I'm just trucking along. I really enjoy these books. With these books, I feel like they definitely feel long, but they don't necessarily drag, especially as I'm listening to them. I just feel like I'm not watching a show, but kind of. And so I've talked about this before. I think this was a perfect book to make into a TV show. And to my understanding, each season is a book. I am still on season 1, like episode 3 or 4. A book I started 2 nights ago was Slaughterhouse 5 by Vonnegut Jr. I am 90% of the way through this. This was one of the books I wanted to read on the Rory Gilmore book list, and it was the end of the month was coming up, so I was kind of looking, and I found this one on YouTube as an audio, and so I did pause the Drums of Autumn for a second to listen to this book. I am 90% of the way through. I will finish today, and then I'll get back to Drums of Autumn. I've kind of been going back and forth depending on where I'm feeling. The Slaughterhouse 5 is a lot shorter of a book. I think it's like 4 or 5 hours audio, normal speed. So it's definitely, it's one of those out of my comfort zone, definitely an interesting book. It is a banned book, so I could see that as well. It's an interesting book. I will share my thoughts on it probably in week 17 when I finish it. The next book is Elatsoe by Darcie Little Badger, and you saw me read that last night. I was at 22%. I'm currently at 30%. I like this book. As I said last night, I liked this book. It's just not a genre that I absolutely love, and so I've been taking it in little chunks. I want to read like 30% each day until I finish it, because it is one of the 25 books I want to read in 2025. So I do want to have it done by the end of the month to finish my goal. So to break that book up, I thought about reading this book and just getting it finished so I could finish When I Fall. However, the lighting in our rental is atrocious, especially at nighttime, and just like the outlets, there's not enough to put lamps and charge things in our room, and so we have to deal with like 1 lamp. So all that being said, I need an ebook, and my library loan for Dream Girl Drama, which is the 3rd book in the Big Shot series by Tessa Bailey, came out, and so I ended up reading 40 pages in that. I'm liking it. It's definitely just like a don't have to think too hard book, which Elatsoe, you have to think a little bit, because while we are in the modern time, but she has certain powers and she can she talks to ghosts, and just like that whole fantasy element just makes you have to think a little bit harder. Where Dream Girl Drama, there's drama. There's these 2 people meet. One is a professional hockey player, one is a protege for a harpist, and they kind of like have a fun afternoon. The hockey player thinks it's like his dream girl, and then he goes to meet his dad, and his dad and her mom are gonna get married. They're older, so it's not like they're gonna live together or anything like that, but they're trying to figure out what they're gonna do from there, because him and his dad have an interesting relationship. Yes, that is the 10th book that I'm in the middle of. I'm really hoping to have 7 of these 10 books done in the week 17. So we're gonna see. That would be a lot of books to finish, but like I said, I've started a lot of them and either had to stop them or whatever, and none of them, except for the Drums of Autumn, are very long. Most of the other ones are pretty short and quick reads, besides that Drums of Autumn. But hope you enjoyed. Let me know if there's a book you think I would like, or if you've read any of these books, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!